Detective Helen Grus of the Ottawa Police will be telling her story to the world for the first time at a police disciplinary tribunal that's been plagued with bias, corruption, perjury, witness intimidation, and abuse of process. Helen faces the bogus charge of discreditable conduct for simply doing her job as an Ottawa police detective. In January 2022, Detective Grus initiated an investigation into a possible connection between 9 sudden infant deaths and their mother's vaccination status. Mrs. Grus's evidence package included Pfizer documents that showed 31 of 32 pregnancies, followed by trial investigators, resulted in spontaneous abortion. Only one baby of 32 pregnancies survived. Within days of opening the investigation, Detective Grus was suspended for discreditable conduct for initiating an unauthorized investigation and was formally charged in July 2022. What's disturbing to learn is that in late March 2022, overwhelming evidence points to 2 police colleagues illegally providing confidential police information to CBC reporter Shamini Yorgnam, which resulted in CBC articles and broadcasts about the police investigation, of course impacting the investigation itself. After leaking the story to CBC, Ottawa police were then faced with a 24-hour ultimatum from reporter Shamini Yorgnam to contact the parents of the deceased infants before the story broke. So it's just a giant coincidence that after the news broke, Ottawa police made a financial settlement with one of the parents. The news was then used as a propaganda tool to assist in swaying public opinion. The timing of the settlement also couldn't have been better, given that it was one day before Detective Grus's hearing in December 2023. The mainstream media has been very strategic in their reporting, just enough to cover the basics but not too much to stir the pot. Of course, things you'll never see the mainstream media report on is the fact that the one and only parent of the 9 deceased infants Detective Grus contacted during her investigation very much appreciated her phone call, or that the grandfather of another deceased infant only had positive things to say about Detective Grus at the tribunal. Members of the Ottawa police at one point got so desperate for a smidge of wrongdoing that they initiated a wiretap, listening in on Detective Grus and her family. For those who don't know, under the criminal code, there are 2 ways for a wiretap to be granted. One way is somewhat tedious, where grounds are established, affidavits are signed, etc., while the other way is via an emergency provision under Section 184.4 of the Criminal Code, meant for abduction, murder, terrorism, or hostage situations where actual lives are at stake. So, as you can all guess, after 36 hours of listening to Detective Grus, they came back with absolutely nothing. The decision maker at Detective Grus's tribunal is adjudicator Chris Renwick, retired superintendent of Ottawa Police, who, by the way, has 0 legal training. The prosecutor is Miss Vanessa Stewart. There are so many things unjust about the current proceedings that it would take hours to cover it all. But for those watching, here are some quick examples that indicate the fix is in. Just as Detective Grus was to testify in her own defense, her counsel, Blair Ector, announced to the tribunal that his client had received a threatening email earlier in the day. He said, and I quote, "It's come to my attention today that Inspector Hugh O'Toole sent an email to my client stating that she cannot rely on any Ottawa Police Service documents. That is witness tampering. That is intimidation. That is obstruction. This tribunal should be outraged. I am outraged," Ector said. Other things of concern is that adjudicator Chris Renwick ruled that defense has to give all their questions for witnesses in advance. Right. Mr. Renwick also ruled that Detective Grus could not review her own handwritten notes from January 30th, 2022, the very day upon which it is alleged she engaged in misconduct by calling one of the parents. Although the prosecutor was thrown a curveball when Detective Grus's own sergeant admitted on the stand that she had every right to look into the file. I'm sure the prosecutor would love to redo that day. As far as testimonies go, all 5 defense expert witnesses were denied by adjudicator Chris Wenwick. They include Dr. Eric Payne, pediatric neurology, Dr. James Thorpe, obstetrics and gynecology, Dr. Gregory Chan, family medicine, Ottawa Police Staff Peter Landluck, and lawyer Sean Buckley. On a different note, before many of the questions could even get past the second word, the prosecutor Vanessa Stewart would constantly object to the question in an effort to protect their witnesses from perjury. Mrs. Stewart also despicably compared Detective Helen Grus's calm demeanor to that of a serial rapist and murderer in this country. Speaking of Vanessa Stewart, adjudicator Chris Renwick denied defense's request to switch out prosecutor Ms. Stewart on the grounds that she is the sister-in-law of the primary prosecution witness. Yes, you heard that correctly. Evidence exists that the case against Detective Helen Grus is an engineered, politically motivated setup by persons within the Ottawa Police Services. Detective Grus has been serving her community for over 20 years as a police officer and carries an exemplary police record with glowing reviews. Mrs. Grus's commitment to catching and convicting bad guys in the sexual assault and child abuse unit is second to none. This case in particular is one of the most important cases in Canadian history, as it will define how police investigate crimes. The question then becomes, are we going to have police officers frightened, like we do in communist countries, to do their duty without thinking of the political implications? In Western police forces across Canada and the United States, police officers are encouraged to initiate any investigation they see appropriate. We allow the police to do this so that politicians can't corruptly direct police operations. Autonomy is granted in order to prevent the police from being used politically. If you're able, please come and show your support for Helen Grus at 211 Huntmar Drive, Canada, Ontario, from May 27th to the 31st, starting at 9:30 a.m. Detective Grus is a hero who is standing up for all police officers and citizens alike. If you wish to donate to Detective Grus's legal fund, I have provided a link in the description.
Lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith would
pray for Helen. We pray for relief from the stress that she's been under and the onslaught that she's faced for doing the right thing. We stand behind her fully and completely, Jesus. And we ask you to give her the strength that she needs, that she may move forward, and that the resolve today, although it be your will be easy for her